Lord. I like the carpet. Yeah. That's also the Tuesday. Yeah.
Zoom.
No complaints. Okay, let's see. Good morning, everyone. We are still waiting on a quorum, so that is where we're at. So we will hold on for 1 minute. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so it sounds like we are potentially not going to have quorum today, but we would like to continue with the meeting anyways, because it's been a long time since we've had this meeting. So our goal today is to be able to bring everyone up to speed, have the consultant presentations, and we're just going to have to limit ourselves so that we don't have any substantive discussion or votes, which is okay. It's good for everyone to have a refresher, I think, here, and we can go from there. So
one question before we go. If any member of the public have questions that they want to ask, that the consultants can hear and we can answer maybe next time. And they can do that, correct?
We can't do public comment, but we can certainly get public input today.
Yeah, so if anyone, that's what I'm saying. So if anyone is here online or here for public input, they can do that.
yes.
Okay.
Okay. So is that clear? Okay, so welcome to the Washington Street Collaborative Work Group. It is 11:05 a.m. and we are not having a real meeting, but I'm going to treat it as one anyways. So we're convening an open session, but it's not open session. I guess the question is, we're still going to stick to the agenda, so.
We're going to follow through with it, but we might have to revisit this at the next meeting.
Yes, we might have to revisit everything at the next meeting, but I guess my question is, should we take public comment and just,
But that's what I'm saying, we're not going to do public comment, we're going to do public input.
okay, and so now we have public input, which we won't be responding to, but we will be keeping track of for responses at a later time. Is there any public input? Either online or in the room. Okay, I don't see any, so thank you very much. We are not going to vote on minutes, so that makes it easy. And I'd like to jump directly into the Francis Street Beach Improvement Project discussion regarding the waterfront engineering scope, which.
Apologies, there's going to be a slight change to the agenda. I believe there was going to be Escape. We're going to give an update on the communication engagement results first.
Okay, so that we're going to start with the communication results first. So I think Laura is here to take it away.
I am, and can you see my screen with the presentation?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everybody. So today we reshuffled the agenda slightly just to start with the open house 2 refresher, since it's been a little while. That happened back in January. We will talk then about a proposed revision to the schedule. We can quickly walk through the changes to the SCAPE team scope. And I know Todd is here to address any questions about the waterfront structural engineering scope. And then we can talk about next steps. We were going to step out for the discussion, but Rachel, you tell us maybe that doesn't happen today.
I think that probably doesn't happen today.
If you want to double check with Leah if she's still on.
I
don't think we should do it.
Yeah, I think it probably makes more sense to do that at the next meeting.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so just a reminder, back in January, we had two sessions of a virtual open house. This was the second in our two open houses that were scoped as a part of this project. We also sent out a digital feedback form via social media and a number of channels, email blast, and we received some really good feedback on the initial concepts that we had developed. So we're going to share, we had a few slides of a quick refresher today, and then just a synthesis of the feedback that we received. So just a reminder of a few of the things we shared at that community meeting. We had, shown the projected flood mapping based on the MCFRM flood model, identified these few flood pathways that will impact Washington Street as soon as 2050 in a mean high water or sort of a high tide condition, and acknowledge that with the Francis Street Beach project, we can start to address two of those flood pathways that are happening in the path of 70 and 74 Washington Street. We laid out our project goals. These range from environmental goals around improving the capacity of the ecosystems to adapt to sea level rise and help to reverse the impacts of sea level rise, and absorbing, buffering, and managing water. We know a basis of the design is also the social goals around helping to reduce flood risk to the cultural and community assets, providing public space at the waterfront that is universally accessible, and also really engaging in dialogue with the community, which of course was the purpose of the meeting. We also are responding to the operational goals that were set out together with the community and with this group to sustain the long-term use of Washington Street, keep it dry for as long as we can, to enhance multimodal transportation, to make sure that the solutions that we're proposing are feasible, adaptable, maintainable, and permittable. And then lastly, clearly understanding and communicating the economic benefits and the anticipated project costs. So this is guide for all of both of the concepts that we put forth to the community. So as you remember, with those parameters, we developed a couple of different sort of look and feel and spatial definitions of two alternatives, and we were asking community members for their feedback. So this first one, alternative one, which we called the dune swoop, took a more curvilinear, organic feel. It sort of followed, the curvature of the coastline and picked up on more organic forms. We had integrated seating along the edges, a boardwalk and sort of natural paths. And there is, the potential for some kind of, flood element that will actually be studied further, and there will be a feasibility assessment to follow. So that's TBD, and it will be adaptable to future changes that may need to happen as we learn more. The second one was more angular, sort of more picking up on the language of the piers and the sort of maritime language down at the kind of, downtown Nantucket and the piers there. There's an overlook bump out that provided a little bit more seating, a more extensive boardwalk, and again, the dune vegetation is the primary sort of vertical structure that you would see. We engaged people through a few different methods. There was the Mentimeter, which was sort of an open opportunity for people to respond to questions live. We also had breakout groups where people met in smaller groups, talked to one another, talked to neighbors about what they liked and would change about each of these options. And then, as I mentioned, we also had a feedback form that got sent out. People could respond to it if they had attended the meeting, and also they could see the information if they hadn't attended the meeting and provide the same types of feedback. So it was interesting to see some of the responses that we got. One of the first things that we asked was, what are your priorities for the space relative to those project goals that I shared earlier? There was fairly good distribution among a few, but I think interesting to see the primary goal that emerged was to reduce flood risk to sustain the long-term use of Washington Street, followed by improving the capacity of natural ecosystems to adapt, absorbing water, creating public universally accessible spaces, and then reducing flood risk to community assets. The other goals around, adaptability, transportation, economic benefits, and the dialogue with community members were not as prominent in people's top goals. And so we shared some of this preliminary imagery on each of the alternatives. And then this is a little summary of the main points that we heard. And so this is actually, I think you have these in your packet. It's sort of the same information summarized in two different ways. The first one is these little sort of thought bubbles representing the specific feedback that we received. I'm actually going to move ahead and just look at the text summary because I think it's succinct, but there's more detail about specific comments in here. So for the dune swoop, there were a number of likes around the sort of natural organic aesthetic. Many felt that it fit better into the Nantucket context. Some people liked the integrated benches and would like to see more seating near the beach. Many people liked that this alternative created more space for native planting. Some concerns or dislikes about this scheme was that some thought it didn't fit into the historic and maritime context as well. There was a slightly smaller beach area. I'll just flip back. So that because of the sort of organic swoop and the way that this path comes up and over, the dune encroached a little bit more on the beach area. So that was one concern that was raised. And then a few people said there should be more access points to get down to the water. Here's a zoom in of the second concept, that one that's a little bit more angular. And, I would say in line with, the Easy Street Park and some of the other parks that we see along the waterfront in terms of its angularity. Again, we had a number of comments about alternative 2, and a number of comments about what people would change. And then the summary here, again, kind of divided on the aesthetics. Some participants preferred the maritime aesthetic, thought it would fit in better. Others thought it was more practical in terms of adaptability and the way it provided beach access. I think that was specifically relative to a more direct shot to the beach in this scheme. People liked the expanded seating area. They felt that it was more accessible with the entrances from both sides. I'm just going to go back. So seeing an entrance both from here and from here. This one is, because of the steepness, a stair, and so this is the ramp that would provide an accessible pathway, but some people liked having both. And then in this one, most participants didn't like the angular forms as much, and people were concerned about the amount of decking, that it had more boardwalk in this scheme and perhaps wanted to see a lighter touch. And then these were just some takeaways that we heard across the board for both schemes. So people wanted to better understand the way that the projects would address stormwater flooding, rising groundwater levels, the longevity and adaptability, particularly of materials, questions about planting and erosion, which we will be addressing in our kind of operations and maintenance plan, but it was something that came up. Real emphasis on the importance of ADA accessibility, questions about kayak access and storage. And then there was some concern about bike traffic and how that would interact with the boardwalk if the kind of waterfront path were to extend in the future. And so we did ask just not kind of a vote on one, but just asked on a scale of 1 to 5, how appealing is each alternative to you? And so the dune swoop had a slightly higher average at 3.58. With the beach overlook coming in at 3.15. So that's just an average of all the scores we got for each alternative.
Can I ask a question, Laura?
Yes, please.
There's 127 respondents. Was that 127 equally for alternative 1 and 2 or cumulatively?
That was what equally for each. And it is, I will note, it's a synthesis of what was provided in on the Mentimeter, sort of live within the meeting. And we asked the same question in the virtual survey. And so this is a synthesis of all of those responses. Sure. And so I think it's worth noting that, certainly these comments from the public relate to the look and feel and the placemaking opportunities of each of these. And we're going to talk, I know, about the next steps in the process following this. So I think we're not asking, and I know you're not voting today anyway, but we're not asking for a decision today. I think that what will happen from here is we will take the information about the public's reaction to the different looks and feels. That will be combined with the feasibility assessment that Todd and his team will be doing, and some of the coastal modeling that the Woods Whole Group team, Joe and his team will be doing. All of those inputs will come together to help guide us towards a preferred direction. I can go back.
The charts, I think, say have 129 and 132, so some people voted twice. If you add up the bars, but so some people voted twice. I'm looking at Vince right now, but
I don't think it is.
Are there other, I'll go back to the side by side. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Perfect.
What do you like?
The height of both.
Oh, yeah.
we have some complaints about the height. What are people going to see? And so,
Yeah.
Well, do you remember, this is months ago now, but we had that question, and Leah and I went out and we put up stakes and string and little flagging on it so people would see. And then as you drive down the road, you never lose sight of the water in my little car.
yeah, well, that's good.
I wonder, just, having I'm just gonna call them the arms sticking out of number 2. Will the way that the sand comes and goes, would that act as an additional break? I'm just wondering, as opposed to it piling up against the swoop. Yeah.
So what, maybe Joe, you could touch on this, but one of the things that we're doing next, if we move ahead with the revised scope of work, is the Woods Whole Group team is going to be modeling the 2 alternatives to understand any redirected flow, other impacts, as well as the way that they tie back into the adjacent properties. So I think with that modeling, we can have more information about the nuances of if there's a substantive difference in the way these perform.
So isn't it also the case that we're going to have an operation and maintenance plan so that even if sand were to pile up, we can rectify it?
That's right. That's one of the deliverables at the end as well.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a whole lot of longshore transport that's very active, especially once you get up into the dune area. So that gets constructed. One could imagine that little hook could either, when you do have a storm event, provide a little wave breaking that protects that little pocket a little bit more, or catches more windblown sediment as conditions evolve. But we'll be looking into the erosion in more detail. Yeah.
Thank you.
Chuck, were you going to add something?
Yeah, question. So have we looked at flanking around, I guess it would be to the north, to the east? Because we know going, west or south, we're going to have continuing projects down to Easy Street. But the flanking, such as through, 92, 96, that area around, that would be Washington Street Extension. But I guess I don't see a north arrow on here. So it would be to the right edge of the figure here.
So the water level that we're sort of designing this project to is addressing those immediate, or not immediate, but the flood pathways that are in the darkest loo that goes across
Yep.
Washington Street there. Yeah, thank you, Laura.
All right.
So you'll notice, Chuck, that pathway coming from the Consu Spring area isn't connecting up Washington Street at that water level, but the flanking does connect or can connect through other parcels closer to the downtown area.
So, yeah, no, so when this barrier gets built and put in place, is there going to be flanking, you know, I guess to the right edge there? To
That is
potentially going
That is
around?
possible. Yeah, we're gonna run a performance model to look at both redirected flow and independent effectiveness.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But acknowledging that this is one
It's-
piece in a larger puzzle.
Right, yeah, it's just how do you tie this back in, this new barrier into, you know, the higher elevation so the water doesn't, you know, find a way around the barrier and then back
Right.
into Francis Street, so.
Right. I mean, what we had talked about, you can see that it addresses these immediate low points, right?
Right.
But when you get to the higher elevations, you can see these kind of dunes that exist today are a couple feet higher already. The idea is that over time, with either temporary solutions you could tie in, and then over time, land bank or town parcels could also adapt to be a part of the system. But
Got it. Yep.
that Kansu pathway isn't as imminent as some of these coming through
Right.
the petrol landing area and these 30 and 32.
Absolutely. Yep. You're right.
And to be clear, this isn't designed to keep Washington Street dry in a major storm.
Correct.
Sunny day.
Sunny day long term, but that has like immediate impact on the storms that you see in the present.
Right. Okay. Other thoughts or questions before we could move on to the schedule, but happy to stay here until questions are answered.
We had questions to Leah from Jerry Connick. I don't know if these are appropriate or not, or go here, but will a site plan review be presented? That's kind of what we're doing now, right? This is from Jerry to Leah. And this was on June 11th. Has the Army Corps of Engineers been notified? That was a question. Will the waterfront engineering scope take into consideration chapter 139, especially the scenic exception section? Many people have contacted me concerning interference with the best view of the harbor when driving down Francis Street. Also, will there be cost estimates along with the new project schedule? Thanks for your kind consideration. So anyway, they're on our unofficial record of our unofficial meeting.
Thank you. And we will officially answer them at the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Rachel, team, should we move to the schedule?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so this the first part in color represents what we've already done. So as you remember, we started our community engagement last summer. We had a public workshop. We had a focus group with the butters in July, and then a public workshop in person in the Whaling Museum in August. Then when we started pre-design in September, which was really some of those initial site investigations, the borings, understanding groundwater conditions to inform the design, as well as beginning some preliminary discussions with permitting agency inputs. And then we used that information to develop those two concept alternatives that we just looked at. We had another focus group with the Bike Advisory Committee in January, and then that second public workshop that we just went over. As you know, we had a pause, pencils down from March until today, as we are getting Todd and his team on board for waterfront structural. And then this is really the piece that's due. So looking ahead, if we were to kind of move ahead and it sounds like maybe if we need to have another working group meeting, that might not happen. It might be pushed 2 weeks, but After this meeting, we would take, or this revised scopes would be taken to the select board for approval. And once approved and contract signed, we would begin our feasibility assessment and modeling efforts, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. That would take us to September, and then we would begin probably mid-September, actually, we would begin schematic design and continue that work, which would essentially be a technical document set that we would deliver to you towards the end of the year. And then following that, we will develop a benefit cost analysis that looks at the project, an estimated, order of magnitude estimate of project costs relative to the benefits that it would offer, as well as that operations and maintenance manual that we mentioned. So we can, on the scape side, we just made some simple slides because you all have reviewed and approved the prior scope. We've responded to your requests from the staff for some tweaks to be made as we're getting started again. So everything in teal is essentially the same. The things that are changing are in pink. So I thought it'd be good just to review. So for our pre-design task, we're complete with the site analysis and basis of design memo. We have had one pre-permitting agency coordination meeting. We have up to 6 more in our scope, so that will continue as the project moves ahead. And I believe Todd and his team will help to spearhead those with both the land bank and the town. We have an expanded stormwater pre-design task that was completed by Hazen, and that essentially looked in much more detail than we had initially scoped about the drainage, calculating the rainfall runoff volumes to understand on the stormwater management components of the site what do we need to be managing. They've looked at some alternatives for green infrastructure, rain garden, and performed some additional calculations. We were requested to remove the order of magnitude costing for the previous plan. I think it was felt that that wasn't so relevant as we were advancing the plan. So we're doing an estimate at the end of the project, at the end of the schematic design set. And then we've had monthly meetings. So task 2 is schematic design, where we are now. You've seen those sketch design alternatives. Those have been developed. We've added a task to onboard Todd and his team, just getting everyone up to speed, having some meetings to share information. We will be taking the inputs of the community meeting, your feedback, and the input on the coastal engineering feasibility study, as well as Woods Hole Group's new modeling to create a refined concept design, which had not been in our initial scope. It was sort of like pick one. Now we need to create a refined one based on new information. So that's new. And then that will be the basis of advancing the technical drawing set for schematic design. We are also working with Hazen. They will be doing some additional stormwater modeling that's been requested, really just looking at evaluating the project design to understand potential flooding in a couple of different scenarios. And the goal is really to quantify and be sure that we're seeing value in the flood reduction benefit of the project. Within our schematic design documents, as these things were added, we were requested to remove lighting and electrical because we understand now lighting will not be an important component of this project, at least at the schematic phase. Estimate of probable cost will still happen, a summary of the state and federal funding sources at the conclusion of the project, and then we will revise the basis of design memo based on any new information that we develop through schematic design. The benefit cost analysis task stays the same. It has 2 parts. The first is just using FEMA's benefit cost analysis tool to complete that assessment, which is a very detailed process that we would follow. Historically would help with getting federal funding. Obviously there's uncertainty now, but that is something that would need to be completed at least in the past for certain funding sources. And then also looking at an expanded qualitative benefits assessment. So for example, the question that just came up that you raised, Chuck, about, okay, this is one segment, what is the situation with flanking? They're going to look at it more in terms of its benefit as a part of a longer term plan. And then a part of this task is also Woods Hole Group's input to that process, the coastal engineering advisory to the process. And then there's the operations and maintenance requirements. This is a technical memo and an estimate that will document the frequency and the cost of operations and maintenance, what we anticipate the timing and the requirements of those will be, so that the town and the land bank can also have a discussion about how ongoing maintenance will happen, knowing this is kind of a new partnership. And then the community engagement has been completed. That's included a planning session, 2 focus groups, the abutters and the BPAC have been completed, the 2 workshops, and then delivering all of the files so that y'all can continue to share those and do engagement. And in fact, as a part of this, we helped develop a revision to the website that is communicating all of this information externally. This is a new task. I don't know, Joe, do you want to speak to just the 2 kind of components of the new coastal modeling that we'll be doing, the redirected flow and then the erosion performance modeling?
Yeah, sure. So I think we kind of talked about it a little bit before. So we're going to look at the project as it would be implemented as a pilot. Look at how that might impact adjacent properties in terms of redirected flow, because that's something that is a concern in terms of the permitting pathway.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in close consultation with the state on actually rolling out some guidelines to do those performance assessments in terms of redirected flow. And then looking at the how it changes, implementing this project changes those potential flood pathways that Chuck was alluding to, and sort of the time volume component of putting something on Francis Street and how that can affect flooding that could eventually still get to Washington Street from other flood pathways that may flank, given a certain duration and water level. And that will help to inform the BCA that Laura was describing. So the avoided flooding from that project can inform some quantitative assessment. And then we'll be revisiting some of the erosion performance modeling. I think the idea here is kind of to drill down into how and the need for a solid core, and maybe looking at a couple other water levels and wave conditions.
Okay, so that's the summary of changes to our scope. Happy to pause for any questions, and I know Todd, you had submitted a new scope, so that's probably up for discussion as well.
I just have a question. How do you assess the need for a solid core? Like, is that based on how much wave action or projection, that type of thing?
Yeah. So going back to the genesis of that solid core, it was the original intent was to have it as a last line of defense for Washington Street. And when you have a dune, any dune nourishment project, you're going to have this ongoing O&M, right? You're going to, if you have a storm that chews up the dune a little bit, you're going to go back and re-nourish. The condition that a solid core or kind of sheet pile would address is really daily flooding at the road edge that kind of keeps undermining the roadway. So we want to make sure that we're not going to have a dune that's going to get completely blown out in a pretty minor storm. We don't think that that's the case here. So there may be the possibility of, with this analysis, making sure that that's viable to sort of have a traditional dune, and that alleviates a lot of permitting hurdles.
Okay, then just, we have had, the town pier is in that same area. The town pier might block a little bit of this, but when we get northeast storms, they come running right down the harbor and they blast right against that whole area. At one point, we had the town pier wiped out sort of 2 years in a row, or 3 out of 5 years or something. And so we've had to build, once we realized we were spending the same money over and over again, we built it differently and put something to block some of the water. So there may be more, sort of, it may be under more, pressure, more abuse than you think certain times of the winter. So just something to keep in mind. I think Chuck is nodding his head. I think he knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I heard the same things from Great Harbor Yacht Club when we were doing their assessment. When we were doing the initial wave modeling here, I think what we noted in front of the Francis Street portion of this project was sort of a near shore berm that was acting to kind of tamp down some waves that would intercept this beach and dune, particularly at this project location. So other parts of the harbor that could be different. It's also possible that conditions have changed since we have bathymetry that is from a certain date. I'm not sure exactly when, but
I think the worst is when the water gets trapped. When there's a certain wind from a certain direction that blows the water in, the water doesn't leave, and then the next high tide comes, and that's when we get sort of those areas take the most abuse. So.
Okay.
So yeah, the wave screener, the wave fence was extended. So I'm not sure what modeling has been done after that, because that energy is now going to be redirected. And so, this could be, the area adjacent that might, be subject to more energy. And again, I don't know what modeling you've done, but this was modeling that we did, 2019 or so with GZA in terms of designing, the town pier and the concrete floating.
That'll be helpful to take a look at, Chuck.
Yep.
So do they have like a floating wave attenuation?
We did. No, that was not installed, but that was certainly, one of the things that was discussed as an option. But they decided to improve and extend the wave fence.
Okay.
In terms of their
any
model.
more information you can have give us on that would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we had GZA do a full, report and modeling.
Great.
So.
Okay. I haven't seen that, so that'd be really
okay.
an important input, I think.
Okay. No, I'd be happy to give you that. Yes. Yeah. No, that was a good piece of work.
Great.
So,
Okay.
but we haven't done anything since, that change has been made. So
okay,
there could be, an update or something that may be needed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on the scape team scope, or I can stop my screen share and y'all can talk about the structural.
I think it seems like we're ready to move on. And I want to make sure I have the right agenda. After.
One addition,
Just that
and
one
also there's,
addition. Okay,
well, we did the kind of discussion over here.
yep, recap on.
Yeah, that was just moved up.
So, okay, so I think we want to go through now discuss an update and approve the waterfront engineering scope.
I don't think we can approve it.
We're not approving it. And I'd like to introduce Todd Turcotte. Todd, how do you say your company name?
Excuse me, par. Just
Par.
like golf, just like golf.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. So Todd Turcotte, we've worked with him in different settings before, but he's recently joined the team as a coastal waterfront engineer. And he will be Actually, Todd, can I turn it over to you to talk about what you're going to be doing instead of me talking about what you're going to be doing?
However you would like to do it,
I
Rachel.
think it'd
I'm
be
happy
great
to.
if you would
Okay.
just describe the process that you'll be going through for the feasibility assessment.
Sure. Just to give you a little bit of background, I know some of the people in the room, but I've worked, as Rachel said, I've worked with this team on multiple projects and concept level and schematic designs on other projects with the land bank at my previous company that I was with, and actually worked with this team in developing kind of the outline of how to move forward a couple years ago on this when it first was coming in. But I have rejoined PAR. I have been in the waterfront sector for almost over 30 years. This is my third stint at PAR, which has been 20 years since I was here last. So when I came back, I am the vice president, the practice lead on the waterfront group that we have. So that's kind of my background, very high level, and happy to be part of the team. So PAR I was approached to see if I was able to provide waterfront structures support on this project. Leah with the town had provided us a roughly 4-page scope of work of what was outlined as to what the town was needing from our perspective to support the SCAPE team. And we are happy to submit on that proposal. Probably the most difficult part of the proposal will be the feasibility and alternatives evaluation for the permitting and how all this ties into the current regulations and how we can navigate this project and make it a feasible construction project also, not just what's on paper and how we would like to see it happen. But working with the regulators in the context of resiliency and moving this forward. So we have responded pretty much in kind with what the RFP had. We will have task 1, which is meeting with the team meetings, which is we estimate over a 28-week period. Hopefully it'll be a little bit less than that, but we budgeted and planned for a 28-week period through the schedule that Laura had presented earlier. Then we have task 2, which is the feasibility and alternatives assessment, where we will go back through the historical stuff that was already done from the boardwalk alternatives, the 2 alternatives that Laura presented, looking at the constructability, looking at the survivability and long-term capacities of the structure so that it's operationally useful, but also can survive a larger storm, 50 to 100-year storm events, and it's not significant amount of damage, but it survives the storm and is reusable very quickly after the storm event would be the ideal from a waterfront structure standpoint. All those alternatives and what Joe was talking about earlier in the core of the dune, those types of things which make it challenging for permitting will be also evaluated from a waterfront structure standpoint to help with loading and structural capacity on what some of the alternatives might be that could perform the best or provide the best long-term protection of the flooding during those major storm events. So, we've worked with Joe and Woods Workgroup over the years on these types of projects and are happy to be back doing that. We'll coordinate with them on some of the alternatives that we have seen successful. But again, how they all tie into the permitting aspect is probably the most important part, which is task 3 in ours in coming up with a permitting feasibility assessment, kind of a pathway of how to successfully get this permitted and where some of the challenges will be. There's going to be some challenges that's known. We're going to have some of that. There's going to be regulations that need to be discussed and really evaluated as to how we can best align with those goals and objectives of the regulations. And then our task 4 is the schematic waterfront structural design. So we'll take the feasibilities and the concepts that Laura's going to be refining with Joe's input, and we'll take those through schematic design, coming up with a little bit more of the robust structural requirements and details that are needed to get to the 30% level of design. And we will also be supporting with our last task 5, providing preliminary construction cost estimates for the waterfront structures specifically, and assisting the team on other aspects as needed to deal with the interactions of the stormwater design and the flood barrier and the boardwalk structures. So high level, went through it pretty quick, but happy to answer any questions from anybody at this time if you have them.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Todd.
If I may, I have a question.
Sure.
So Todd, what level of detail are you going to be, including, the stormwater needs? I understand that's work that's, I guess, happening in parallel, but some has been done. It seems that, the scope is really, waterfront structure, flood structure focused. Just in the sense of, really looking at the big picture, and also with permitting. Are you going to be looking at the stormwater permitting side, or are you just really looking at the waterfront structure side?
Our scope is the waterfront structure side, my understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, but hey, the civil side, who's doing the stormwater,
Hazen,
that is part of the Hazen, that's their scope. So the interaction of the outfalls or the interaction through the whatever core structure we have or boardwalk, how those happen in the waterfront aspect of it, we will coordinate with Hazen on that. Is our goal.
Okay, so yeah, I've been out of the loop a little bit with other projects, but just in a sense, how does this all kind of come together? Because everything's got to function as a whole, and you can't really do one project without the other. And
That's right.
so at
Yeah.
some point, this is really going to have to come together. Maybe it happens after the concept design, but I could see, impacts of stormwater on the structural side and vice versa. And at what point do you start to, really get that integrated? And especially permitting, you can't talk about a time frame until you look at permits for the entire, scope of the project. And again, I don't know if Hazen's looking at that in their piece, but I guess I'm concerned because this really does feel like two separate projects and a potential risk.
So Hazen is within the SCAPE team, and I can say that we've worked in the same structure with on land bank projects with Todd before, and I feel totally confident that we can be seamless. So I'm not worried about it. I do, but under SCAPE as a prime, Hazen will be doing that additional stormwater modeling that I mentioned, and that will be integrated in, thinking about that both in relationship to the coastal modeling that Joe and the team are doing and Todd's scope of work. The intent is to be able to come out with a seamless and permittable project.
So at what point will that package be put together as one?
It's going to be one
set of
package
plans?
when you
It's gonna
receive it.
be- Yeah.
So the timing who's going to integrate those two packages? Is it going to be PAR or is it going to be Hazen or is,
The way we've done it before on other land bank projects is Todd's team provides sheets to us. We coordinate on title blocks, we coordinate on all of the base information, and we'll fold in sheets that are the structural details and plans. And so the intent is to, when you have that schematic design technical package, everything's in there and it's coordinated.
All right,
Yeah,
so
and from a
SCAPE puts the whole package together.
Yeah,
Essentially,
yeah,
is what you're telling me. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, and from our permitting assessment that we're going to be preparing, that'll include the stormwater. We're just not doing any of the stormwater. We're going to have to coordinate
Right.
with Hazen. What are they planning to do? We
Yeah.
don't know yet what they're
Yeah.
planning to do,
Yes.
but there's going to be permitting impacts to that we're going to identify. Again, this is the outline for what's going to be required
Yeah.
for permitting, not necessarily the permitting at this point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just in terms of the outline and then
Fine,
schedules,
yeah.
because you're going to have all
Exactly.
the other agencies and
Yep.
timeframes and reviews. So no, you answered my question. I'm good.
Good.
But thank you.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
I'll say that we have had a number in those initial studies that I mentioned that were completed in pre-design. We've had a number of discussions already with the town staff about what is going to be most appropriate for stormwater management. For example, we don't want big underwater chambers because we don't want to have to maintain them, and we have concerns about groundwater and so on. So we already have pretty clear direction about what are the possibilities that are within, the study. And then we'll be refining and documenting those in the schematic package.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
there any other questions? No other questions? All right, well, thank you very much. See, I appreciate that, Todd. That was very helpful. And
Well,
I believe we are on to our next steps at this point. And I think where we're at right now is that our next meeting will be on June 27th at 11 a.m. In which case we will be approving the waterfront engineering scope and answering some of the questions that we were unable to address today. And in the meantime, if anything comes up, I would recommend emailing Leah, Vince, or myself. And Laura, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I just had one question, Rachel, and we don't have to answer it now, but we had initially said that this may be able to be on the agenda of the next select board. I'm assuming if we're going to the 27th, we'd be looking to 2 Wednesdays following. So is that the July 9th? Just thinking about mobilizing the team, that's all. We could also
Yes,
talk about this offline. Yeah.
Can I get back to you on that? Because there's usually about a 2 to 3 week lead time to get things onto a select board contracts agenda. I will need to check with finance department what the next deadline is.
Sure.
Fingers crossed we can make it. But I would just give everyone the heads up. It might be July 23rd.
Okay.
But we will confirm that number.
Okay. Thanks, Vince.
All right. Well, thank you. And we will respond to that as well, Laura. And I want to thank everyone for their time today. And without further ado, I think we can move on and close out our unofficial meeting of the Washington Street Collaborative Worker. And we will see you all on June 27th at 11 a.m.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Nice to see you.
Much.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
bye.
Bye.